Right. Good evening, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. It gives me a great privilege to have the opportunity to all of you for today's very important events on the calendar of the Africa China Center for Policy and Advisory, the ACCPA. And I'll just, for the benefit of those joining, and then after that, I'll set the rules and engagements for today's webinar. And very importantly, we'll introduce our guests and our special guests who have taken the time to join us to share their insights and first-hand experience regarding the topic that we have for today. So I'll just zoom in. We're starting now. So the brief about the ACCPA, the Africa China Center for Policy Advisory, is a policy research think tank headquartered in Ghana. We have teams in Ethiopia, in Botswana, in the DRC, in Tanzania, in Morocco, Tunisia, and also in China as well. And our mandate is basically to bring the African agency into the conversation of Africa-China relations and try and be a part of the knowledge production phase of the engagement between Africa and China. As we know, policy recommendations, policy implications must always be backed by thorough research. And we believe that as African researchers and scholars, we have a role to play in shaping the kind of engagement that is between Africa and China. So we operate like a full-fledged think tank, research, publications, reports, and of course, also putting together a platform for engagement and idea sharing like we have here today, discussing the post-FOCAC dialogue. So we are trying to delve deeper into the outcomes of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, that was held in September in Beijing, China. And of course, in due time, you will get to understand a more deeper background to this very important platform that has been in existence 24 years ago, that's since 2000, and continuously shaping and of course, bringing in more ideas and solutions in the context of Africa-China relations. So we are very excited that all of you have the chance to join us. And for ACCPA, we are open for partnership. So in case you are looking for any form of partnership, you're on this meeting and you're looking for partnership regarding the work that we do, we are more than happy to engage and of course, understand how we can bring the African agency at the forefront when it comes to Africa-China relations. So we are very excited that you've all joined us. Now today, we have a very important assignment, which is to, I said again, unpack. We'll try as much as possible to unpack the outcomes of the 9th FOCAC, which was held in September. So the topic that we have is to reflect on the achievement of the FOCAC and also allow ourselves the room to ask some very critical questions on how, as human institutions, as we know, how we can improve on the way forward in terms of the continent's engagement with China. And very much so, we are very privileged to have scholars and researchers from both sides, from Africa and China, that are the key stakeholders, of course, in this relation to share their various perspectives and insights, and they come with different backgrounds in terms of that. But before I go even further, just to let you know, the structure of today's dialogue is very simple. So first, we're going to be receiving a keynote, speech, very precise and concise keynote speech from a very important individual, which I'll introduce in due time. And then I'll introduce our panelists for today, It's going to be a very interactive session, so we're not doing any sort of presentation or anything. It's just conversational kind of dialogue that we are having. I will introduce our panel. And after the panel discussion that I will lead, then we'll also welcome all of you participants to come in. This is where you get a chance to ask your questions. And those of you, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with the Zoom app, you have the Q&A button there that you can use. So always use the Q&A button to send through your questions. And I'll gladly ask our speakers to address those questions. So that is how it's going to be. And then, of course, we will round up today's session. So we have a keynote, then we have a panel discussion, we have a Q&A, which involves you, our participants, and then we'll call it a day. So thank you very much for that audience. Now, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to have the opportunity to introduce our special guest and special individual. In fact, it's in all our various engagements as a think tank. I would say today happens to be the first time where we have a representative of the highest level of China in any country be present physically to share perspective at our function. And today we are very privileged to have in our midst His Excellency Mr. Ton Defa, who is the ambassador of the People's Republic of China to the Republic of Ghana, who have joined us right at the embassy in Accra, Ghana, to give us his first hand account of FOCAC. I guess he was the delegation lead for Ghana's participation in the recently held FOCAC, together with the president of Ghana, of course, as a lead representative. So His Excellency Mr. Ton Defa, ambassador of the People's Republic of China in Ghana, holds a Bachelor of Arts in English from Nanjing University, Master of Public Administration from Peking University. He joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China in 1991. Since then, he has worked at the General Office, the Department of Personal and Department Consular Affairs of the Foreign Affairs. He has been in the Chinese missions in the Philippines, South Africa, San Francisco, Cape Town, Munich, and now he is with us in Ghana. So you can see that he's someone who is well grounded in a lot of global affairs, from China to Asia to Europe to Africa, and of course back again in Africa to Ghana. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to have His Excellency Ambassador Ton Defa to join us, and he's going to share briefly with us his thoughts and his experience as a Chinese diplomat, and of course also as a Chinese citizen, and living through all this journey of Africa-China relations. I'm sure he has a first-hand account to give. So we have the privilege to welcome Ambassador. Ambassador, please, you have the floor now. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Frempan, for your warm and welcoming remarks. And it's really my privilege to attend today's dialogue online, and to welcome all scholars from both China and Africa. And particularly, I'd like to thank Mr. Frempan for your coordinating of today's forum. So it is actually my great pleasure to attend ACCPA FOCAC Dialogue. Last month, I was honored to accompany His Excellency President Akufo-Addo to attend the 2024 summit of FOCAC in Beijing and meet with President Xi Jinping. The two leaders actually joined and announced that the elevation of China-Ghana relations to a strategic partnership and reached a series of important consensus, which of course laid out a blueprint for the future development of China-Ghana relations. And I'm humbled at this moment, critical moment, I can be hosted as ambassador to this beautiful country. So after returning from Beijing, actually, we held a briefing for the local media on the FOCAC. And at the time, Mr. Frampton, you attended as an honorable guest and made an impressive speech. So today I'm delighted to come to you home ground to exchange views with scholars and friends attending this dialogue on China-Africa cooperation in the new era. So I understand everyone particularly in China and African continent, are focusing on this year's FOCAC. There are a lot of specialities in this year's FOCAC. You may notice that China, especially our top leaders, all top leaders attended this Beijing FOCAC summit. And on the arrangement of the opening session, all African leaders, together with Chinese leaders, they stationed in the presidium on the front, lots, sitting in the meeting hall. So I think it's a special treatment. So the 2024 FOCAC summit is really, a good opportunity for both China and African countries. All 53 African countries. They participated, which have, of course, have diplomatic relations with China. They participated this year's FOCAC. And it was the largest diplomatic event China has hosted in recent years, and with the highest number of foreign leaders in attendance. The 2024 FOCAC Beijing Summit was filled with highlights representing a historical milestone between China and Africa. Based on my own experience, I may share with you brief my experience, the outcomes of the summit. I like to use the 3 E's to describe this year's FOCAC summit. So the first E is the elevation, which is the elevation of relations. During the summit, China established or elevated strategic partnerships with 30 African countries. This means that China now has a strategic partnership with all 53 African nations that have diplomatic ties with China. The relations between China and Africa was also elevated to an all-weather China-African community with a shared future for the new era. Africa now holds a unique position as the only continent to have this level of partnership with China, which fully reflects the strategic importance China and Africa hold for each other. Just as President Xi Jinping pointed out, the China-African friendship is now at its best period in history. China is 53 African strategic partners standing shoulder to shoulder, will surely exert great influence on promoting the well-being of our peoples and better maintain the world peace and stability. So this is the first E I'd like to share with you. The second E is establishment, which is establishment of 6-point position on China-Africa joint efforts to advance modernization. Realizing modernization is the legitimate and inalienable right of developing countries. China is willing to work with developing countries to ensure that no one left behind in global modernization. President Xi Jinping pointed out that China and Africa should advance modernization that is just and equitable, that is open and win-win, that puts the people first, that features diversity and inclusiveness, and that is eco-friendly, and that is underpinned by peace and security. This proposition is widely accepted by African leaders, and we have a significant and far-reaching impact on spearheading faster modernization of the global south and advancing global modernization. The third E that I like to share with you is the enrichment, which is the enrichment of cooperation. The term partnership actions was drawn up for China-Africa cooperation going forward. The two sides adopted the Beijing Declaration and Action Plan for strengthening China-Africa cooperation in the next 3 years. The term partnership actions covers 10 major areas, including mutual learning among civilizations, trade prosperity, industrial chain cooperation, connectivity, development cooperation, health, agriculture and livelihoods, people-to-people exchanges, green development, and common security. For example, China will invite 1,000 members of African political parties to visit China. offering 60,000 training opportunities, carry out 1,000 small and beautiful livelihoods projects, launch 20 programs of health facilities and malaria treatments, send 500 agricultural experts, launch 30 clean energy projects, and create at least 1 million jobs for Africa. The Chinese government will also provide 330 billion yuan, which is equivalent to 50.6 billion US dollars of financial support through the next 3 years to implement the 10 action plans. This indicates that there are huge opportunities for future China-Ghana and future China-African cooperation. We welcome African countries to participate. Dear friends, there's a Chinese proverb saying, when one person gathers firewood, the fire is not strong. But when everybody adds wood, the flames rise high. It is difficult for one person to carry 1,000 kilograms, but many people can even move a mountain. Cooperation is always better than working alone. China is the largest developing country, while Africa is the continent with the largest number of developing countries. In a world undergoing major changes and unseen in a century, China and Africa need to stay united more than ever. The 2024 FOCAC Beijing Summit paints a bright future for China-Africa cooperation. And I believe that under the joint leadership of Chinese and African leaders, with the solidarity and cooperation among 2.8 billion people, we will give fresh impetus to Global South cooperation and break new ground for building a community with a shared future for mankind. So that's the major 3 points that I like to share with you in this dialogue, and I believe I can have more time to share with you if you have any Q&As. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was very precise and straight to the point, and of course, sharing your first-hand experience in Beijing as a leader of the delegation from Ghana, together with the president, and of course, sharing with us those key outcomes. The respect of cooperation is better than working alone. So from what you've said, obviously set the tone for us to delve deeper into the conversation. I don't know, we did not actually plan for Q&A for your session, but I don't know how long you want to stay. You want to stay and follow the discussion, and then maybe in the course of time, if you have any comment to make, then of course you can make. But in all, we say thank you for those insights. We appreciate for taking the time to join us for this very important discussion. So I will then proceed to be welcoming, and we go into the next phase, which is welcoming our panelists for today's discussion, which we're going to do for about 25 or so, 30 minutes. And then we'll be welcoming questions from our participants. So if you have any questions, please, as we begin the conversation, you can combine that together with what we just heard from the ambassador, and then we'll be more than happy to address them. So let me just introduce my panelists for today. So joining us, of course, we have 2 ladies and a gentleman. So we have Grace Yuan, who is a PhD. He's a doctor. She's a scholar, and of course also she has a stint with the London School of Economics. She's kind of a consultant on her own. I'll give her a chance to tell us briefly about herself so that we can get to know who we have. Of course, my very old friend Sophie Yi, who also at the Tsinghua University with a Schwarzman scholar, also very experienced around the world in terms of the issues about global development. So she also introduced herself. And of course, we have Isaac Ankara, who is a senior research fellow with the ACCPA, my colleague here at the center, who's also very much experienced in Africa-China relations after, of course, studying in China for 6 or so years with the various degrees. So, ladies and gentlemen, this are going to be our panel, and the way it's going to be, like I said, it's just going to be an open conversation that we're going to have with them, focusing on the outcomes of the FOCAC, what we make of it, what has the 24 years of its existence shown in the context of Africa-China relations. Where do we find the convergence in terms of the aspirations of Africa and how it fits into the broader FOCAC agenda? We'll briefly touch on the 10 strategic pillars or outcome of the FOCAC as was issued by President Xi in his speech, and of course, as Ambassador already alluded to. And we also, give ourselves the chance to ask critical questions, trying to, and these questions are meant to get us focused on some of the key relevant things that we might have not been able to cover or the FOCAC did not cover, but we think are very important in terms of the continuous engagement with China. So feel free to touch on various angles as you do. But first of all, I just have a general question for our panelists. So of course, and I will take the views of our panelists, each of them, on this very question, which is the 24 years of the existence of the Forum China-Africa Cooperation FOCAC, and as we witness the 9th FOCAC in Beijing. What do you make of FOCAC as a strategic forum, in the context of, even if you pick the African case, we have what we call the Africa +1 Summit in terms of Africa's engagement with other countries and other regions in various shapes, which similar to what we have as FOCAC. So what is your first take on FOCAC as a platform shaping the Africa-China relations? So generally, just in the next 1 minute, I'll start with Grace and Sophie and then Isaac. So Grace, you must just give us your own perspective on FOCAC and what it means for Africa-China relations.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I think in summary, FOCAC is actually an international platform for China and Africa. And the changing themes and topics every year in FOCAC actually reflects the change of China's own development and also China's own development success, and also the changing trend of the global economy and the global politics. So I think FOCAC is actually a lens to show the changing world we are living in.
Thank you very much, Grace. That was straight to the point. Yeah, Sophie, you may want to come in. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I just echo what the ambassador just mentioned. I think one key word for me reflecting on FOCAC is unity. What I saw is the unity from the African continent on the land of China. That African countries and leaders coming together to support this joint initiative with China. And this is the perfect example of how we can move forward with the global development initiative, and also many other initiatives that were undergoing, the civilization initiative, for example. So a lot more to come. Thank you.
Sophie, yes, Isaac. You're muted, Isaac. You're on mute.
Yeah, for me, I'll just go straight and track it to history, where we normally have, when it comes to China, Africa, they used to have a relationship even prior to 2000, the year 2000. Ghana, for instance, were friendship with China. And when it comes to even some of the infrastructure development, we were even having a relationship with them. And I think FOCAC provided a more formal way of dealing with Africa, making it more concise. So it has become very instrumental, and I think they are really doing well in terms of this. We can't have a situation where about 54 countries, we are doing things differently, but bringing all African countries together under one platform makes it very formal and very easy to also carry out a lot of, development. So no wonder, China, FOCAC has really become effective in the past 24 years, looking at the various things that they put in place. So I would say that it has become a formal way of, advancing the development of Africa and China as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I'll start with you again, staying on this. Before, of course, the main purpose of today's discussion is to look at, the journey of FOCAC, achievements or otherwise, and of course, also asking critical questions. So one of my question, before we get into the key message or information that came out is this very simple question of what was your expectation of leading to the 9th FOCAC and looking at the outcome of the FOCAC? I mean, did the conversation, did everything that happened meet your expectation as an African researcher or scholar? I mean, what were you expecting going to FOCAC, and did the outcome meet those expectations?
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I remember before FOCAC, started in the month of, is it January? No, July or something. I've forgotten the month. Can't be specific, but we had a meeting with the Chinese embassy in Ghana. And when we went, they were trying to understand Ghana, what we need. And so the point is that we were trying to get thoughts from various think tanks. And I was expecting that this FOCAC, from there, I was expecting that this FOCAC would be more country specific, where they are looking at the various needs of the country, not coming up from a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach, where like they look at what the country needs, taking ideas from the various think tanks and the leaders and delivering in that, because that becomes more impactful. So I wasn't, even though I was expecting, I wasn't also quite surprised when I saw President Xi Jinping talking about delivering more impactful projects, small, beautiful projects and those kind of stuff. So my expectation was for it to be more country specific and more impactful. And I think it delivered in that sense.
Okay, thank you very much, Isaac. Grace, from where you sit, I know you're doing a lot of work in the development space. You have your own expertise. Going into FOCAC as a Chinese scholar, what were your expectations of FOCAC, and did you have a feeling that the FOCAC that was held met those expectations?
I actually think yes. I actually read the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Beijing Action Plan 2025 to 2027 after the FOCAC. And from this document and report, I actually see a big change in the China-Africa relationships and what is coming out of this year's FOCAC. We're going to talk about this a little bit further today in the webinar, but I think besides the Chinese government initiative with the Africans, I think the Chinese enterprises engagement in Africa is also increasing. That is one outcome, and at least one outcome I expected coming out of the FOCAC this year. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more in the webinar today, but this is my main idea.
Okay, Sophie, can we have your take on that as well?
Yeah, sure. I just want to build up on what Isaac was saying about the small and beautiful. I think this is a key feature reflection for me coming out of FOCAC, because this is aligned with not only just the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also the Africa's Agenda 2063. And also it is a reflection of China's domestic economic priorities as well. Giving more emphasis on capacity building and local empowerment, focusing on small yet beautiful initiatives could directly benefit local communities without overextending financial resources. And I think that is a good way of moving forward with China-Africa cooperation, especially also with the enterprises doing business in Africa and China.
Right, perfect. So I believe that those points set the tone for us to get even deeper into some of the key outcomes that we saw at FOCAC. And obviously, as we know, the Africa-China relations, predominantly shaped by some, physical or hardware kind of relations. So in this case, we're dealing with infrastructure investments that we've seen in Africa mostly, of course, China being the leading investor in Africa's infrastructure over the years. And we all understand the gap that exists in Africa in terms of infrastructure and what it means for Africa to bridge that infrastructure gap. Again, from what we've seen China do over the last 4 or 5 decades of investing in infrastructure, which has unlocked China's economic gains, as we've seen over the years. Obviously, it's kind of set the kind of good relations that Africa can have with China in terms of those infrastructure as we speak. Continent needs between $130 to $170 billion, according to the African Development Bank, for the next decade and above, to be able to bridge the infrastructure gap. However, as we witness in the FOCAC, 9 FOCAC, we realize that there's a shift from large infrastructure mega project to smaller, more sustainable initiatives. So the question that we're asking, what are the factors driving the transition, and how do African nations view this change in terms of addressing the infrastructure gaps? Are the small, beautiful projects going to meet the infrastructure needs of ever-growing Africa infrastructure? So we are just trying to situate the continent's infrastructure ambition that we have, and China almost always being a key partner in bridging that gap. So going to FOCAC, I mean, now the conversation is shifting around small and beautiful projects. So we just want to unpack that. So if you can help our audience to understand what that entails, what actually was what actually broke the back of the camel in terms of trying to shift from the mega infrastructure project to the small but beautiful projects. So Isaac, you might want to start that one. Just give us, a sense of what it means in terms of Africa trying to bridge its infrastructure gap.
Okay, so we need to understand the varying needs of Africa. At first of course, we need infrastructure. China came, helped, but I think we've grown to a point where African has started trying to prioritize certain things, and I think that is why China also will try to make changes to that. When you check the population of Africa, it's one of the, regions which has a lot of, youth. And most of the African countries are now suffering from youth unemployment. And even in Ghana here, I can give a practical example. Those who are vying for power and those in power actually know that youth unemployment is a security issue. So they can't go to FOCAC or they can't have a conversation with China and talk about something else. The needs are now changing. They are trying to prioritize for instance, like youth unemployment issues, trying to find ways to solve it. And also, we transit into local manufacturing, industrialization, all these things. My point is that all these things are now things that various leaders are prioritizing. So if the Forum of Africa comes to this part, then they have to talk about it. And I think that is what, China is doing, is trying to respond to the varying needs of Africa, what Africans are actually prioritizing. So when you check the summit, the action plans, and when you check both the mainstream, the subtle information that they gave, you could see, green development, you could see digitalization, small stuff, because in a way it will help give jobs to people. And as I said earlier on with my first submission, before they came up with these ideas, it is not a top-down approach. They took a bottom-up approach where they met with various think tanks in their respective countries, trying to take ideas. And I remember we talked about some of these things at the Chinese embassy in Ghana. So in a nutshell, it's a reflection of the varying needs of Africa and African countries trying to prioritize what they need now. It's not as if that the infrastructure project is a bad thing, but I think that when we take a different approach to achieve the infrastructure also helps. We deal with what is, we deal with the priorities first in economic scale of preference. Okay, so we deal with the ones which are really, important. We trickle it down to it. So I would say, number one, the varying needs of African nations and agencies has influenced this shift. The second thing I also talk about, I think, is more of a focus on sustainability or sustainable energy. Recent development has seen a lot of, it signaled a strong imperative for the world to transition to a sustainable energy future. And this has squarely placed renewable energy squarely at to most of the global discussions. China cannot be different in this case, if only they have, African at heart. They need to protect the environment. They need to, African leaders have to protect the environment by using green energy and green industrialization. So when you check the action plans, you could clearly see the focus on green industrialization, green development, digitalization, and all those kind of stuff. So without wasting my time, I just want to say that one, the varying needs of Africa now is making a place, influencing, the shift where African leaders are prioritizing other stuff which are more local to us, and also the focus on the global discussion, which is basically on sustainability. And this is a reflection of the action plan. When you read it, you can clearly see both mainstream and both subtle. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. So Isaac has given us 2 key points. The first is the priority focus or priority shift of Africa going to FOCAC, and of course, the conversation about sustainability. He believes it's what is actually scores a shift in terms of the commitment in moving from mega huge infrastructure I've seen in the past to small but beautiful projects. Sophie, I'll come to you to take your view on this same question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Paul. I just want to again build up on what Isaac has been saying. Meeting the local needs is really the key words here we're looking for, because as you said, there are 54 countries on the continent of Africa, and every country has their own needs for development. And this is not just building roads or having power plants, but this relates to building infrastructure also boosts the local needs in health, education, and green energy, etc. So really, we need to, for each one to understand and prioritize their own needs. And by China's move, by providing a smaller projects, enable China to prioritize high quality investments to foster local empowerment. And I think that is really important, because it's also aligning with global sustainable development goals while mitigating the potential financial risks from China's perspective.
Thank you very much. That's mitigating potential financial risk from China's perspective, and of course, meeting the SDGs. Thank you very much, Sophie. Grace, if you want to come in from that angle as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. So first I want to add on to Dr. Isaac's green development in the new in the FOCA outcome this year. I want to, because I have a research on China's energy engagement in Africa, and which is already have one article published with LSE International Development, by the way. So I think China's infrastructure investment in Africa really reflects China's own national development needs. And for instance, the energy sector, right? So China's energy investment in Africa started in the late 1990s. And the first stage of the investment is actually the investment in crude oil sectors in African countries, right? And then the second stage of China's investment actually focuses on energy infrastructure, which is the big infrastructure, right, that in African countries for a really long time. But then China is actually entering the third stage, which is focuses on vocational training, capacity building in a lot of African countries. And I want to give you an example, right? So in this year's action plan, there's actually a China-Africa digital technology cooperation. So it means in the future, China and Africa are going to build different digital technology centers in Africa. So I just want to give you an example, right? So people who live in China, both Chinese or Africans, know how developed the digital economy and e-commerce is in China, right? So for instance, right, a lot of new cosmetic and skincare brands in China, they don't even enter physical stores. They just start off as online brands, right? Then they only sell them online. So this kind of fast-paced e-commerce business model, if you want to attract Chinese business people to go to Africa, to invest in Africa, can Africa take this kind of digital infrastructure?
Hello, Grace. We lost you there.
I think
China's.
Yes.
Did I stop?
Yes, you stop. But you can.
Sorry. So am I back? Okay. So yeah, I'm just saying, like, for the African business, right? In order to attract Chinese business to go to Africa, right? To do business with the African, right? Especially in the online models, right? You have to build up the strong digital infrastructure, right? And you have to understand the business models that is working prevalently in China. So I think this kind of the infrastructure needs change, right? Which requires a lot of African institutions and African enterprises to understand the fast changing pace in China, right? So I think this is what I want to add to the two panel speakers. Last thing about the Small Beautiful project, right? I think, for instance, China is going to build medical healthcare, right? It's going to hold some sports connectivity festivals with African under the 10 Partnership Initiative, right? So I think this actually solves the soft infrastructure needs in Africa. This is not the physical infrastructure, but this is soft infrastructure. So I think, yes, China is going to meet the infrastructure needs in Africa, no matter what.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful, giving us a background to China's own, internal development and what is shaping that kind of infrastructure discussion. Of course, also looking at Africa's own context in terms of the soft infrastructure that we need as well. And building a digital platform is very key. This is small but beautiful in nature, very sustainable as well. So I believe that those speaks to why we are seeing that kind of shift. Let me just play a bit of turning it around a bit to bring in some other views that have been raised regarding the small but beautiful when it comes to infrastructure investment in Africa. One you already tackled, which is China's own economic, underpinnings, but of course also about issue about debt sustainability, which is associated with these big mega projects. So my question is, none of you touched on that. Of course, I just wanted to briefly, what is there? Do you find this debt sustainability, especially in the context of Africa, which the facts have shown that a number of countries in Africa have gone through a series of debt crises. In fact, my very own country, Ghana, we've gone through a debt-related crisis. We're now under IMF bailout, $3 billion IMF bailout. Can cite a good number of countries in Africa that have gone through that. So did this also have a role to play in the shift from big mega projects, infrastructure project, to the small but beautiful? Anyone to come in on that? You would think this narrative of debt sustainability in Africa, which has come to the fore, did it play a role alongside all the ideas that you've raised in the shift from mega to small but beautiful? Anyone, Isaac, Sophie, anyone can take this if you want to.
I mean, it's very, very difficult, to be honest with you, very difficult to answer that question and be, very specific about it. I can't really say it focused it. I mean, it played a part. Neither can I say it didn't play a part. But I have an idea that, of course, China had it. It became an issue. But you also have to recognize that China also has its own plan, as Grace was saying. but they are doing this, things, strategically. So yes, we can say it might have focused it, but who knows? It can also be that it didn't, because China also had its own, what do you call it? Its own strategic, plans. So for me, I would just be on that thing. On the fence and
Okay,
say
okay.
that. I don't know if
Thank
they
you very
have.
much. Yes, Sophie, anyone who has any idea, any comment on that? Ambassador, you are there with us.
Yes.
We see you. In the course of in case you want to make any remarks, please, you can just raise your hand.
Okay.
Using the app.
Yes, I may raise my hand on the. Yes, several of the colleagues mentioned that through this year's book, you found there's a little bit shift from like big infrastructure projects to the small and beautiful projects. But actually, to my understanding, it's not like so. You may notice that, of course, over the past 10 years, we have built a lot of big projects, infrastructure projects in this continent. You know all those figures, like a lot of 1,000. 100,000 kilometers of highways, and 10,000 railways, and 100 port facilities. But still, I think even before, you may notice we have some small beautiful projects. Long years ago, we built a lot of wells in Ghana itself. Not only in Ghana, also a lot of African countries. Like my colleague told me that we finished building 100 wells in the rural areas in this country. And we have a lot of those small projects many years ago in many African countries. So it's not just we started from this year's FOCAC. And also I'd like to tell you that there's a consensus between our two presidents, that China and Ghana will still focusing on cooperation in agriculture and also infrastructure. If there is a need from particular countries, we can still do that. So it's not a big shift. It's only that we found that a lot of local or general public, they need to benefit directly from some projects. So that's why we can do it, and we're willing to do it. So I understand we may send some medical staff coming over here to do the Caltech surgeries or those kind of things. So it's all small but beautiful. It helps local people. So I think it doesn't mean that we are shifting, focus, through infrastructure. In China, we have a saying: if you want to be rich, you need to build roads first. So, and to our knowledge, Africa needs a lot of funding for infrastructure. That's the crucial to its way to modernization and industrialization. Without infrastructure, Africa cannot achieve that goal. You have a 2063 agenda. I think the base. What China's experience is, we need to build good infrastructure as a way to attract foreign business. So I think if any African countries has some privilege or priority to build a road, I think China is open to that. So that's my point of view.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think this famous quote that backs China's drive for infrastructure development, which says that if you want to develop a place or you want to be rich, build roads. I think it's very it just gives me a sense of what it means for infrastructure to be at the center, in terms of unlocking potential. So it's very important. And as you've seen over the year period. Yeah, Grace, you want to come in?
I want to share a personal story, because I think that is as an example of infrastructure as well. When I worked and lived in South Africa, the first time I ordered something from the internet, right? So take a lot. And then the delivery person called me, and I told the delivery person I was not at home. You can just drop it outside the door, right? But the delivery person said, no, you must to make sure you are at home so I can give you the package. And I was so shocked at that time, right? Because in China, you have the package station, right? And then the delivery person just put your package at the package station. I think a package station is a successful infrastructure, product in China. So I just want to give you this example. This is just comes from my own personal stories. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace, for that. Yeah.
And Paul, I think on the issue of the debt issue, where I think we need to also understand that China has already demonstrated their willingness to renegotiate the loans and of countries struggling with repayments. So this can provide, African countries with greater flexibility and reduce financial pressure. So of course it can be an issue. Of course, people have raised it, so there's a possibility. But China's already, given that willingness to always renegotiate and restructure also the loans too. So I think it is something that we can also, put at the back of our minds. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think of course, we can all see that there's a goodwill in terms of China's willingness to engage and discuss into details some of these debt-related crises. Of course, when we look at the numbers on the ground, it does not support the other narrative when it comes to Africa's debt. So the first point is that yes, multiple countries on the continent are facing debt-related crisis. That is a statement of fact. But the other spinning around it, that these countries are dealing with this debt crisis because of China, the fact is opposite of this narrative. And you can pick specific country cases that we've used in most of our analysis that you can find on our website that shows, in fact, in our own country, Ghana, during the debt restructuring that happened 2 years ago, because Ghana failed to meet its debt obligations. When you look at the numbers, out of about $30 billion of our total external debt, China was about $1.9 billion, which is around 6%. So to sum it all up and say that because we owe China 6% and we are in debt crisis, therefore China is the cause of our debt crisis, I think you've not been fair to the whole discussion. So we can see that is not the case. And again, we can also see that even in that case, for Ghana to even get a deal with the Paris Club, thing, they have to go to China, and China really engaged, and the debt was restructured, and therefore we're able to get a deal with the IMF. So I believe that is the context that we have to look at. Now, I want to elevate the conversation from just limiting FOCAC between Africa and China, but situating in the context of South-South cooperation, which is now a new form of in terms of the development cooperation arena, where we typically have the traditional system, which is the North-South kind of cooperation. Now we're dealing more South-South cooperation, and FOCAC is actually during the FOCAC summit actually emphasizing that issues about how FOCAC can elevate the South-South cooperation agenda, and of course helping to shape global governance. So my question to our panelists is very simple. How do we see, how can the FOCAC be a key platform in shaping global governance system as a South-South cooperation model? You can pick specific cases like maybe the UN, the WTO, and all other, the WHO, any other institution that you think FOCAC, in terms of where it is positioning itself as a South-South cooperation model, can help shape these global issues. So anyone want to attempt?
I may start myself.
Yes, sure, please.
You are experts on international relations, but to my point of view, FOCAC as a platform between developing countries, is crucial, especially under the current world situation. As you may notice, that there is a tendency of breaking out something between the North and South, and the China and Africa continent. Of course, we belong to the developing countries group, and we believe the current world international order is not fair in a certain way to developing countries. A lot of international mechanism, is not fair to developing countries. So we believe, together with with China and other developing countries, we try to want to do some changes in the international arena, which is helpful for the developing countries. As you may mentioned, the debt issue. Actually, the debt issue is an issue many years ago. China actually is an economy, and Mr. William mentioned, you are right. China's debt, I mean, the bilateral debt owing to China is very tiny part of any country you mentioned, so-called debt trap, actually. So it's been there for many years. It's not China. It's some Western financial institutes, some Western countries are doing this, but nobody mentioned this. So we believe it is unfair when speaking about those international mechanisms. So we believe together we are trying to build, to make some changes in the international institute that will be useful for China and Africa as a whole. So we should, at this moment, as long as developing countries can unite as one, we can be stronger. And we regard Africa as a stronger, or at least a potential stronger polo in the world. And you have the large continent, you have 1/4 of the United Nations member states. So you are strong. So together we can have a big voice in the international arena. So that's what we try to cooperate with African countries for that kind of change, to my understanding. In this way, so we can have a better environmental international mechanism that will be helpful for African countries.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your thought on that. Grace, you wanted to say something in regard to that? Yeah.
Yes, thanks for the ambassador sharing. I think China and Africa has been partners for a long time, and regardless of the South-to-South cooperation, but I think the South-to-South cooperation framework especially provides the developing countries in the global South a framework to strengthen their collaboration on the global stage. I'm saying this because the history of the South-to-South cooperation actually goes back to the 1960s to 1970s, when the Soviet Union and the United States are in the Cold War, right? So the southern countries from the developing world, they were trying to find alternative ways to strengthen their technical cooperation at that historical moment, right? So I think this is very interesting.
We lost Grace again.
Very well. Am I still there?
Yeah, you are here now.
Yes.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. The international narratives keeps saying China is pushing or promoting the Chinese development model or modernization. I think to some extent it's not. China is promoting. It's just like for a lot of developing countries, they do not have a model to learn from, to replicate. And China is the only most recent development model that other developing countries can learn from. So I think the South-to-South cooperation brought its historical meaning to a very critical current moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. That was very insightful. So to our participant, please, we are welcoming questions from you. Now is the time for you to get involved. So you can use the Q&A button. Already we are seeing a number of questions coming through. We are still open for more questions. So if you have any questions, please try as much as possible to ask your question, and then we'll be more than happy to get. I think we've seen some already raising their hands, and also we have question in the Q&A. So I'm going to start with a question in the Q&A. So there's a question from one person here, Destiny. He says he's from Cameroon, and he's asking a general question to the panel, so anyone can take it. It's asking, what practical lessons can Africa learn from China's economic rise that, if implemented, can help Africa skyrocket and fast-track economic emancipation and emergence? Of course, I think this is tied to what Grace was saying earlier about China being the most recent success story, and historical in nature as well, because in terms of the numbers of people that are lifted in poverty, no economic transformation that's happening in the world has been able to lift that numbers. So I believe that is the background to this question. So the question is, what practical lessons can Africa learn from China's economic rise? And that can help us to also move on the same track. So I welcome anyone, Isaac, Sophie, you can come in if you have any comments.
I think, infrastructure is there, we can learn from it. I think that one is too clear. But I would like to focus on what China did as far as the human capital is concerned. I schooled in China for 7 years. I stayed in the city of Xiamen, and I saw how they invested in the education sector, which actually, science, technology, and all those stuff, engineering, math, which forward is technological and what industrial transformation. There's no way we can actually develop like China, even half, without developing our human capital. And I think that's something we can learn from them. You can learn. I schooled there. I know what they did in terms of, building up, investing in their schools, the education and everything, which translated into their development. So it's something approach that we can take. It's something we can't run away from it. So I will just stay on that one. Of course, the infrastructure development we can learn, which is glaring, but it comes, the investment in human capital comes before that. It's something that we can learn. Yeah.
Yes, I will also echo on that, because what if I can borrow a quote from Chairman Mao Zedong, "Woman holds up half of the sky." That is how China was able to overcome a lot of the development difficulties. Empowering women, promoting gender equality, not only providing universal education to all the youngsters in China, but also providing people, regardless of man or female, the equal opportunities, access to education, to employment, to vocational training. I think that is one of the key stepping stones for China to overcome a lot of the, development issues. And also, there is region-specific policies targeting the poorest population in the rural areas. For example, we have currently, China is undergoing rural revitalization projects, really providing what is needed for the local people, because China is so vast and similar to the African continent. Every country have every different needs, and every region in China have different needs. So the best policy that China adopted was to leverage the best advantage of each region to maximize its development opportunities, so that each region can really, for example, by the coastal area, we had the special economic zones. We had the famous Southern Tour by Deng Xiaoping in 1992. That was what helped China, the southern part of China, really to develop its manufacturing industry. And after joining the WTO, that was China's chance to become a member of the globalization progress. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for those insights. Of course, people-centered, as you mentioned, of course, targeting poverty, agricultural revitalization. These are all very, very important lessons, as we've seen China go through all these phases, putting people at the center of development, so people-centered approach. I think it's a running theme in almost all the projects and all the developmental progress that China has made. Putting people first. So those are very key insight that we receive from all of you. So there are a lot of questions here. This one is from Helena. So she's asking whether it's Ambassador or Grace or Isaac to comment on the entry of the AU Commission as the first multilateral entity to be a part of the FOCAC. So what does the development bring to Africa? China? Of course, we saw the AU chairperson there as part of the leaders at the FOCAC. And so she's asking, what does this mean for FOCAC, for AU Commission to be a part of it. Asking whether Ambassador can comment on this when we have the AU. Yeah, sure.
Yes, AU has special unity to attend as this is Beijing FOCAC. It means that right now China supports African unity and integration. And we know Africa has an agenda of 2063, which is mapped out by AU. Africa can only be stronger as a unity, not as individual countries. So in this way, we are supporting AU to play a key role. And you may even notice, not too many years ago, we just opened our mission in the EU. But in over many years, we do not have such a mission. We opened mission, I think it's about over 10 years ago. I'm not, have a correct date yet, but it shows that we support Africa as a unity, as a unified continent, to be integrated, not only infrastructure, and also we are supporting also free trade zone in Africa. Africa as a whole, is 1.4 billion people. You have a total GDP over 2.8 trillion US dollars. And you have a huge resources in this continent. There's huge potential for Africa as a continent. So that's why China invited EU as a partner for the FOCAC. And a lot of things between FOCAC actually is being discussed in the EU. It's our mission in the Addis Ababa, talking about EU. So we are supporting a lot of EU programs. You may see one icon project is the AU office in Addis Ababa. It's one of the icon building in Addis Ababa. So we also support the CDC building in Addis Ababa. It's the African Union. We're also supporting programs for there's a Secretary of African Free Trade Zone here in Accra. We are supporting this organization. So we hope African continent can be united as a strong member of the international community. So that's our general position. So I think AU can play a more important role in unifying Africa and doing a lot of things for this continent.
Perfect. Anyone with a comment on that, on the AU Commission being a key part of the as a multilateral entity, the first multilateral entity to be part of FOCAC? Yes, Sophie.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador, for the comment. And Paul, so my previous job was with the United Nations resident coordinator in Beijing. So one of our flagship event was the follow-up symposium for FOCAC, and we in that event actually what I have witnessed personal experience was we had witnessed the leadership of the Dean of African Ambassador Groups in Beijing, and also the AU Commissioner in Beijing. And in a lot of the events that the UN hosted, we invited the African ambassador groups and also the AU Commissioner and Chinese government and other international organizations to join to discuss how we can leverage the UN as a facilitator, catalyzer, and mediator between some of the projects under the border framework of FOCAC between China and Africa. So I think AU definitely is an important partner that the UN and also others work with in Beijing. That's from my personal working experience in Beijing.
Thank you very much. So we can all appreciate the fact that AU as a continental body is very critical in the ongoing engagement between Africa and China. At every point in time, I think it's very important that we have the AU in the room to help shape. And I think that will lead us to another question that I will ask later on. So Helena, your question has been answered by our panelists as well as from our ambassador. So there's a question about how important the maritime Silk Road to Africa, and I think this is BRI. We're not really discussing BRI now. So I will leave that. So there's a question from Dr. Soji. So he's asking, he say, I understand that then the interference balance of China's foreign policy. But in the case of Africa, where leadership crisis and corruption are killing the continent and the citizens, how do you think China can assist in checking these twin evils in Africa utilizing FOCAC platform? So, as you know, China foreign policy, non-political interference. I think Ambassador can really come in here as being the representative of government of China here, and as well as part of the foreign affairs team. So as we said, the policy is political interference. But like as the question is asking or narrating, the Africa leadership crisis and corruption, this is the twin evil as the question is referring to. So how do you see China assisting in Africa in checking these two incidents, utilizing FOCAC as a platform?
So, I didn't get clear your question.
So the question, so we are situating the question. The question is about Africa facing incident of leadership crisis and of course corruption. Again, China's foreign policy is non-political interference. And then we have FOCAC. So the question is, how can China leverage on FOCAC to help Africa in tackling this very two important issue, which is leadership, regarding leadership and of course corruption?
Okay, yes, that's our long-term policy. China will never interview in internal affairs of any country. And this is one of the reasons why I think China is quite welcome or popular in this continent. But of course, you know, if you notice the 10 action plans, this year's 10 action plans out of Beijing FOCAC, the first action plan is the exchanges of civilization, which means China, you know, it clearly said that China will invite like 1,000 party members to go to China. We can share with our experiences of our governance what Chinese officials, you know, conducted their duties or doing their things in China. So in this way, the party members from this continent can have their own experience, what's happening in China, how Chinese officials, you know, conducted their duties, I mean, to the answer the calls from the general public. So that's the way we are doing Wales, of course. You may notice that China is we have strong discipline for the party members. So in this way, we can also exchange China's way of doing things in Africa. So African sides, I mean, no matter which country, no matter which party, they can see themselves, whether it is suitable for them or whether it's not, so whether it can do in his own country or not. So we just show what we have done, and then you can choose whether you like it or not, you can learn it or not. So that's the basic idea of what we can do. You know, you're mentioning about the leadership. So I think in this way, we can exchange views on how governance, I mean, or bad or good governance. You know, we have, of course, we have some bad lessons in past, but we change it. We have a particular word we said self-revolution for the party members. So you mean, Mr. Frippen, you know what that means. So we have a strict, tough disciplines for the party members. So that's the basic idea I want to share with you. Thank you.
I think that's very key. I mean, especially when you referred to the FOCAC point about party-to-party exchanges, it boils down to leadership, and that goes to the heart of the question that the person was asking. And it's very important that if there are lessons in that kind of exchange, as China will share, then of course Africa will be in a position to learn from these projects. Again, as you mentioned, it doesn't mean that China has had it all 100% successful. The challenges, and of course, as you self-actualize it, and of course try to resolve it internally, then you'll be on your way of having good leadership and of course tackling issues about corruption. I think that is very key, and that's a clear way of seeing how FOCAC can help Africa meet those needs in terms of tackling leadership crisis and corruption. So and that is very, very important reference for us. So this question from an anonymous attendee, so he said he works for a consulting firm in South African, was in Beijing for the FOCAC, worked for a French consulting firm, and they observed that most of the countries did a side event the FOCAC, like invest in DRC, invest in Gabon, invest in Madagascar, which shows that there's really an appetite for African countries to attract more direct investment. However, we all know that China is decreasing the investment to Africa. So how do we situate that, trying to resolve this issue? So obviously talking about African countries, still very, buoyant about trying to attract more indirect investment. But of course, as we saw, in terms of China's financial commitment to Africa. And I believe that there's a shift, rather upwards from the last FOCAC. I mean, of course, the highest was the $60 billion, and now we have in the FOCAC 2021 was lesser, but now we've gone to 50.7 or 50.1 billion dollars, which is quite significant. In fact, most of us going to FOCAC were not expecting that huge financial commitments from China arising out of FOCAC. But obviously, to the surprise of many around the world, we've seen this 50.7 billion. So to your question, I believe that there's rather an upward appetite, and clearly we can all witness that China still views Africa's relations as very, very important and very, as already elevating to the strategic level, as was alluded to earlier by Ambassador. So I believe that the trend is actually the same. And of course, we might want to look at in terms of numbers, absolute numbers, to make these conclusion that there's a decline in terms of China's investment, interest in Africa, but that's not the case. The engagement, as we've seen, the 10 pillars cut across various means of engagement, and of course, the financial part just $50 billion, but there are a lot of other cooperation areas that shows that indeed the appetite is equally revitalized, and there's more going on, more to be done in the next 3 years between Africa and China than we think. We just focus on just the absolute numbers. That's my take on that question.
I also want to add on what Paul just said. Among the $50 billion, actually $10 billion is earmarked for investment promotion for Chinese enterprises in Africa. So which means Chinese government is directing this strategy, it's at least the investment strategy in a lot of African countries. I think that is very important.
And if I may also jump in here, I think if we look at what is happening within China, China is not enjoying a double-digit economic growth anymore. That is the brutal fact. And China has just launched a set of stimulus policies to revitalize its economic growth, coming out of COVID and having the heat of geopolitics and a lot of uncertainties. China itself is trying to figure a way out of what is so-called, perhaps a lot of the critics will be saying that a middle income trap for China. Well, many will disagree, but some will agree on that. So I think it's fair, what we need to look at is not just the fact that China might be decreasing its investment, but it's what it really happens within China. And I think once China's economy back to is double-digit growth or even better, then we might see even more investment interest in Africa. And there are a lot of the side events, including, for example, Angola, Uganda. They also had a side event investing in Uganda, introducing to the Chinese enterprises in Beijing to opportunities in Uganda. So I think there's a lot of the opportunities and ideas flowing around, but it's really depending on how much money, how strong the Chinese economy is to really bounce back, and deciding on how the future investment trend will go.
Just to add to what Sophie just said, we need to also not take the amount just in absolute terms. If we do a historical trend, you could see that it has been an upward trajectory since 2000. Of course, it hit 60 billion in 2015 and 2018. It came to $40 million US, in 2021, but it just went up again. And when you look at those things, when you take like an average, it has been an upward, trend. So that must be taken into consideration. And secondly, you also need to also know that when you see the money, you need to also read the plan. The action plan espouses a lot of stuff. It's not a matter of just, they didn't just throw the money there. They thought about something. It's strategic. They are developing something. So you just see the money and you don't look at the plan and you don't read in details, both mainstream and subtle, you're not going to get it really well. And third thing, as Dr. Sophie was also saying, that you need to also understand that China is really not doing well, just like in most of the countries. I was reading an article where it was looking at the growth trajectory. This year, quarter on quarter, it grew like from January to October. It's like 0.9%, which is not, quite impressive compared to the previous years. So we need to also understand that some of this. So in totality, I think the 50.7 million is quite a substantial amount in scope. Just that when you take it in absolute terms and you just say it has been a reduction, you're not going to see it very well because of these three reasons that I've said. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Isaac. We'll be coming to our last but one question, which is from Kizito, also on the Q&A platform. So it's asking about value addition, about Africa not exporting natural, assets, raw materials, but also adding value. So I guess in the context of FOCAC, as we witness, historically or even the current one, how do we see FOCAC, helping Africa to add value to natural resources before exporting? So is there anything that came in and around FOCAC that, as we've seen, that captures or tries to help Africa solve this very issue about adding value before export?
Yes, I may.
Yes, Ambassador, please.
Yes, actually, you may notice this year's FOCAC theme, there's a word, industrialization and modernization. So generally speaking, in this continent, you have a long way to go to achieve industrialization. So now I think China, because as we elevated the whole with the whole continent, our bilateral relations, we are focusing on. In China, we have called high quality development between Africa and China. We cannot, keep the same status as we have done 20 years ago. Recently, I visited a lot of Chinese companies, business here. I talked with the CEOs here, and I asked them, what is your future plan for doing business in Africa? You still thinking you import some cheap goods coming from China and do some trading here and then you get some money? I think no, it's a long way. You should focus in the long way. What's the long way? You need to build factories here, to build plants here, to offer jobs here, to add value. What's a lot of African countries have suffered a lot because in the past, a lot of resources being shifted out of this continent. They just get a tiny part of the value from this product. Now we are encouraging Chinese companies to do this localization. You need to hire more local people. You need to shift, those production lines over here. Take an example. Tomorrow I will meet with a CEO of a private company here in Ghana, in Takoradi. I may pronounce correctly. He's a factory of ceramics. It's a big plant. It's from Foshan. It employs like 6,000 local people. 30% of the product sold in this country, 70% exported. It's huge product. It's quite popular. I think in this country, many local people know this factory. So this is what we are encouraging. So in the FOCAC action plans, Chinese government promised we have provided some fund. We encourage actually business coming over here to build factories. You may also notice 70% of the Chinese investment in this continent coming from private companies. So if you take the numbers like right now, the stock investment of China in this country is $40 billion US. So 70% is about $28 billion are from the private business. So a lot of private businesses are very active. I received a lot of calls since I came here, and they are looking for business opportunities actually. because there's election coming next month, in 1 month's time. So a lot of people thinking, as Ghana has been quite well known for the world, you have peaceful election for over many years. So people are looking for opportunities. They're coming over here, they're building factories. So that's I think China can help African countries to achieve, like, you want value-added products out of this continent. And we Chinese, from our side, we encourage African countries to export more to China. Although Ghana is not the least developed countries, but we encourage Ghana to sell more products to China. And I even mentioned this to your ambassador, Ghanaian ambassador in China. I asked ambassador, hey, ambassador, how come you do live streaming in China? Use the e-commerce platform in China. He told me that we do not have much productivity. Our quality is too small. It's not enough. So I think we can do a lot more in the way of industrialization in this continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for giving out these practical examples of what role China is playing in terms of the industrialization drive of Africa, and then instituting that right in Ghana. Some of the examples that we've seen, I think it's very impressive, and I believe that is the way to go, as industrialization is still a very core part of the development agenda of Ghana and, of course, the African country. So I think there you have it. That's a very clear case of what it means for value addition in Ghana and, of course, across multiple countries in Africa. Isaac, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one to what he's saying. I wanted a specific example. I think this one will help in terms of the technological transfer and also the human aspect of it. China has signed agreement with the Ghana government, especially specifically University of Energy and Natural Resources, because something the Luban workshop that was launched recently, and that university is very close to my house. So I was asking one of they've actually got a land. I think there are plans which are far advanced, and I think I wanted to bring it to the light that China is doing a lot underground, which might not come to the mainstream media, but I can specifically say that in terms of the technological transfer, I think something is going on there. And there was an article that I was reading. It said the workshop jointly established, and I want to read this workshop jointly established China's Liaoning Agriculture Technology College and Ghana's University of Energy and Natural Resources. It's expected to inject new viability into Ghana's agriculture development, and blah, blah, blah. It continues to say that. So there are plans which are in play. It might not be in the mainstream media, but China is also doing it to add to that value in terms of what promoting this technology transfer in terms of agriculture and all those kind of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, Luban workshops are now very popular, very, very effective skill, vocational skills, development in many countries in Africa now, since it became a part of the development cooperation part between Africa and China. I think it's very, very impressive. And there are a lot of publications on it, a lot of reports on it now, showing the way to go in terms of technical and knowledge cooperation between Africa and China. So I believe that our audience can make time to read more about the Luban workshops. You can find a lot of knowledge information about it now and see how that is feeding into the continent's own agenda as well in terms of skills development, vocational skill development especially. I will just be wrapping up now, so I will just be taking the last comments from our panelists, and of course, Ambassador will also give his final thoughts. So I'll start with Grace, if you can just give your final comments, and then Sophie and Isaac, and of course, we take the last comment from our very own Ambassador. Grace, are you there, or we've lost her? Yeah, Sophie, you can come in.
Yeah, sure. I just want to add to Ambassador's point. Actually, the Ethiopian ambassador went on TikTok and the coffee beans were sold in seconds, and the ambassador was really shocked by how fast the coffee bean was able to go out to the customers. And I think that is a good example. And you've mentioned the Luban project, Isaac and Paul. Also, there are e-commerce academies. I can't recall the exact names, but I'm sure there are one of this kind of projects that help train entrepreneurs in Africa to use the e-commerce platforms to sell African products to China and elsewhere. So I think that is a positive cooperation and also innovative way of cooperation. And also we're seeing more special the trade parks, the industrial parks being built in some of the parts of on the continent, and that is also leveraging not only from China's development experience, but also to join it to find out a path, a unique path for African continent to develop, because I think only localized development means could help Africa to move forward, and only Africans could decide its own path forward. And that is the key. Thank you.
That is the key. Africa can be the one to decide and to also engineer their own development path. Grace, I'll come to you, and then Isaac.
Sorry, I'm back, right?
Yeah.
Thanks so very much to Paul for inviting me to join the ambassador and other panelists in the webinar today. And I think there are two comments I want to conclude today. So first, I want to add on to the source-to-source technological transfer, which is a very critical topic among the international stage right now, because in the past, when we talk about technological transfer, it focuses on north to south technological transfer, right? But right now, because of China's technological leading power, so south to south technological transfer has become a rising topic. So this is the first thing I want to say. Second, I think from the institutional level, there are a lot of things can be done around FOCAC, but there are a lot on the people-to-people level, we don't have time to delve into that today, but I think there are a lot of things can be done. For instance, the academic exchange, think tank to think tank exchange, and the cultural exchange. So I think not only the Chinese and the Chinese government to do, but also I think the African institutions, African enterprises, African people should actively engage with Chinese as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. I think you mentioned something that we couldn't cover, which is about the think tank exchange, which is where we fall into that category, of course. But we're hoping that we'll have another chance to delve deeper into that level of cooperation under FOCAC, and we hope to play a key part of that as well as a think tank in Africa. Yeah, Isaac, last comments?
Yes, just to make it brief and very short, I just want to say that the FOCAC has been very effective for the past 24 years. Of course, it's providing, a platform where China can formally deal with South Africa and also be very effective. Yes, this year's FOCAC has really shown a change, and just as I said earlier on, because of the growing, the varying needs and the growing agency of Africa, and also the global shift towards sustainable energy. So they are looking at what Africa actually needs, being more country specific and dealing with that. And I think that one is a good thing, and I think is going to be more impactful to that. Of course, the money, when you compare it with, the 60 billion is a decline, but when you take it in, the historical trend, it's actually not a decline. We need to look at what the action plan actually say. And I think it's a way we can move on with that one. So thank you on that one. That's what I want to say.
Thank you very much, Isaac. On that, as we've seen, of course, for the first time, and you track the commentaries and everything following the FOCAC, is that we can actually see the action plan. If we pick some of the continent's flagship projects or programs, Agenda 2063, and talk about program for infrastructure development, the continent, Africa, agriculture, programs and all that. You can see that all of the, in fact, security plans, everything is actually can be found more like a convergence in a way in the FOCAC action plan. That is very impressive to see, and therefore it does not it shows that there's no deviation in terms of what the continent path is going forward and what the FOCAC action plan is actually also portraying, and that is very, very important. Now, finally, I want to take our ambassador's last comment, and for us to end this discussion. Thank you.
Yes, I feel today's dialogue is very good. I mean, I learned a lot from scholars, panelists from both China and Africa, particularly in Ghana, and it really helped me a lot because especially you guys, touched a lot of key issues on FOCAC, on issues between China and Africa in general. So it's really helped me as a new ambassador to this country, and I know, my mission. I'm humbled to be the ambassador. That I feel a lot of jobs need to be done during my tenure here. Actually, I do encourage exchanges between Africa and China. I understand there are still a lot of misconceptions and misconceptions or misunderstandings between China and Africa. I mean, either China, do not understand better about Africa, and also a lot of African people do not understand China. So it's really useful for both sides to have more exchanges, of course, not only between scholars and think tanks, but also before the general public. So it's good, in the 10 action plans, we designate the year 2026 as the year for people-to-people exchanges between our two continents. So I'm willing and also happy to see more people from this continent going to China. I give you a small figure that I just got from my colleagues. Till this time, this year in Ghana, there are about 13,000 Ghanaian people visited China. It's almost equivalent to the pre-COVID time. So I'm glad to see that. So it's very useful. In China, we have a saying, people-to-people exchanges play a crucial role for the bilateral relations. So my mission is here to deepen the bilateral relations. So I'm willing and also happy to see more exchanges happening between Ghana and China, of course, between scholars, between the think tanks. Thank you very much for providing this platform. Thank you for sharing your views with me.
A big thank you to you, Ambassador. We are so grateful. I mean, we thought we were going to have you for just a few minutes, but of course, you've stayed with us through and through. Maybe at a relevant time, shared your perspective. We know how busy you are. To spend almost 2 hours with us today has been an eye-opening for us. So we appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to engage more with you. And of course, we hope that our work can also contribute to deepening ties between Ghana and China, and of course, also zooming into their continent-wide engagement with China. Thank you very much, Sophie, Grace, and of course, Isaac, for making time to join us. We are very grateful. The session has been recorded. We will prepare it and put it on our YouTube channel. So those who join us, you can rewatch again in case there are any further questions that you have our email address. You can always send questions to us, and we'll be more than happy to help you address. You can find almost all our panelists on LinkedIn. So you can take a screenshot of their names and go on LinkedIn. You can find them there, connect with them. I think the Ambassador too is available on almost all social media platform. On Facebook, you can find the Chinese Embassy Ambassador page there, and of course, you are welcome to engage with him as well. I think it's from the little I've seen, both encountering him in person, of course, also from the social space. I believe he's a very open person. I think he's very much open to engage. So all my Ghanaians who have joined this session, please ensure I get in touch with the Ambassador via his social media, and I think he'll be more than happy to engage and share ideas. And I think that is what he brings to the table, and I'm very excited about that. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining, and we'll come your way again in our subsequent programs. We hope to see all of you there. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.